Joe Knows South Lake would like to thank the following sponsors. My name is Joe. 20 years ago, my wife and I moved to Lake County with our 4 young children and settled down. In that time, we've worked, worshiped, played, and raised our family. Today, I've met the people and discovered the businesses and organizations that make up a vibrant, dynamic community. Join us as we share with you what makes South Lake great. I'm Joe, and Joe knows South Lake. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy Thursday, South Lake County. Obviously, we are not in the studio today. We are out here at the Claremont Performing Arts Center. We are joined by Charlie Grinker, the host, creator, and director of You Are There. Charlie?
Good to see you, Joe.
Welcome to Joe Knows South Lake. Thank you for agreeing to be with us and helping set this up. Got a great facility here. How are you today?
I'm great. I am.
Good.
And I'm happy to be with you because you know what? If Joe knows, that's good enough for me.
Well, now, you know, it's really kind of cool that the name of the show, Joe Knows South Lake, I get to say all the time. Now I know Charlie Grinker, right? Okay. Now you can say, you know, Joe, people will know what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
From our lips to God's ears. Maybe someday it'll be Joe Knows Orlando. That's a few years out. We dream all the time about our future assistants and interns in our studio and all of that. So we're really grateful to be here. You know, Charlie has a long storied career, and as usual, I will give you his bona fides, at least what I could fit on the page, okay? This is Charlie Grinker, the host, director, and creator of You Are There, which is a show about his career. Well, actually, it's not about his career. It is taken from his career in film and television, interviewing for, we were just talking, he's been in the business for 70 years. He is the president and founder of Charles Grinker Productions. He is a member of the Directors Guild of America. He is a Korean War vet. He started his career in the 50s at 17 years old as an usher back when television was almost always live. He's worked on such greats as The Show of Shows. We're going to go through that. I'm not going to let out all the cats out of the bag. You know, Charlie, you have become quite a fixture in the entertainment here at CPAC, and we are at CPAC. You know, I want to give great credit. This space is the Black Box Theater in the Claremont Performing Arts Center. Again, it's become quite a solid foundational member of the community, bringing the arts and entertainment here, professional arts and entertainment, not just local volunteer or amateur. I want to ask, how did you get started? I mean, did you just need a job and that was the one?
No, I mean, since I was a kid, I knew I wanted to be in the broadcasting industry. I wanted to be a fireman first. But, you know, once I got past that, and I loved to sit up on the engine when they had the parade and all that, I was a sports fan. I still am. I'm a big sport. I love sports. Sports for me is my comic strip in the paper. I absolutely enjoy it. And I guess the first thing is I decided I wanted to do something where I had control as much as possible over what the work was. And that's not easy to find. I mean, I did everything just to make a living. I sold shoes for miles ahead. That's what she said, you know. I worked in supermarkets, all that when I was 15, 16, 17. The key, though, was my goal was to get a job at NBC. I knew someone who had been what's called a page boy, which is like an usher, a gopher. That's what you are.
Right. We know. We understand the concept of page from the Senate and the Congress, right? I mean, that's the only place that they still really call that.
Right.
The page. It was the errand boy.
Yeah,
seat people, help things move smoothly.
Well, the thing is, everybody who went to school in the metropolitan New York area who wanted to get into broadcasting, whether it was NYU or Columbia or St. John's or Fordham, everybody wanted to be a page boy because that was a way to get on the inside and meet people at NBC or CBS. But the thing is, they only had about 20 people on the staff at that point, and each year they would have something like 500 interviews, and finally
To get those 20 guys.
well, you couldn't even get a job. You couldn't get an interview, but I did get an interview. They liked me. I got the job. It paid $32.50. That was considered a reasonable amount of money at the time.
Especially for a 17-year-old.
Oh yeah. Well, I turned 18 immediately.
Right,
It was very
right.
close to my birthday. So basically, that's how I got my foot in the door. But from then on, you see, the changing point for me, I was drafted. The Korean War had heated up again. The Chinese communists were coming into Quemoy and Matsu, and they were worrying the world that they might invade full blast and so on and so on. And I was drafted, as a lot of other guys were. And I decided that I was going to make something out of it. So in Korea, my dreams were to work in radio at that time because there was an Army broadcast center. Well, when I got there, they interviewed me, and you know what they needed? They needed people on the railroad. So my first job was
Military thing. It doesn't matter what your experience, at least when I was in, what your experience and skills were.
it's what they knew.
Well, we need this, and you're here now.
yeah.
We don't care.
Yeah.
Well, I don't care if you're a good cook.
But I rose rather quickly in the job of being what's called a crisis clerk. They suddenly, at one point, decided an officer had left, and they needed someone. And I was a corporal at the time. But when there were no lieutenants around, they would take whoever seemed to be the most intelligent or brightest or whatever it was. I ended up running the midnight shift, 12 midnight to 8. I was chief dispatcher of the Korean National Railroad, 712th Battalion.
I think that's so cool because, what year was that, 55?
That happened in 54.
So you really kind of helped establish the Korean National Railroad.
Well, no. The Korean National Railroad had been there. It's just that they needed a lot of help, a lot of guys.
Well, the Army helped organize them and put them
Right.
on really
Yeah.
a right check.
Yeah.
I want to backtrack because there's a story in your bio that I want you to tell
Right.
about your show of shows.
Oh, well, your show of shows was when I came back. I got a job as the page boy, the gopher.
So now you're 20 though, right?
Now I was 20. Yes, I was 20 years old. And the show of shows was the #1 show on television. The stars of the show were Sid Caesar and Imogene Coca. And the writing group on the show, Mel Brooks, Carl Reiner, Howie Morris, who people probably don't remember, and then another young man. He was 30, I was 20, Neil Simon.
So here's the thing. These are guys that are completely unknown at the time. They're just back behind the scenes, right? Not completely unknown, but they weren't
unknown,
superstars,
but they weren't
right?
what
yeah,
they
weren't
became.
big famous
Well, Neil
celebrities.
Simon, to me, is probably the most significant American writer of comedy since Mark Twain.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that.
His list, his Broadway theater is named after him now. Amazing man. But anyway, they liked me. I did things like, oh God, what was my most important duty when I started after a couple of weeks? Sid Caesar asked me, would I mind Saturday was a big day. You rehearsed all day. The show was live. No
Right.
no editing,
No
no
cuts,
nothing.
yeah.
I mean, if you made a mistake, it was there.
Saturday Night Live before
Yeah.
Saturday Night Live. yeah.
Right, that's right. Well, a lot of that is based on your show of shows. But anyway, he said to me, I got something important for you to do. And I got so excited. And you know what it was? To pick up his wife at the beauty parlor at 3 o'clock to come to the rehearsal.
Because he'd be in trouble if she didn't get
Yeah,
picked up, right?
Yeah. So I got to know Frances. Instead of Sid Caesar, I knew Frances Caesar. But she was very nice to me. And finally, they let me really get involved a little bit in the rehearsals. And the high point of my young life at 20 was one day they were having an argument about whether a particular scene was funny or not. And sitting around a table, Mel Brooks, Carl Reiner, Sid Caesar, Imogen Coca, and they
all these legends of these comedic geniuses.
And I'm
right?
there, and literally there, serving coffee when they need it, okay? And finally, Mel Brooks turned around. I was right behind Mel, and he looked at me and he said, "Grinker, what do you think? Is it funny?" Well, oh my God, I didn't even hesitate. I said, "It was funny the last 10 times you've done it."
Do you know, I love that story because I can just picture Mel Brooks. Grinker, what do you think?
Oh,
Is it
yeah.
funny?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Do you know, those kind of experiences obviously laid a foundation for you, and obviously you moved into other areas. You eventually opened up your own company.
Yes.
But they brought you forward to a time when you did a show called Class of the 20s. I mean, you'd had a storied career. Now we're fast forwarding to the 90s.
Right.
And you had this idea that you pitched to somebody for Class of the 20th Century. Tell us about that.
I had that idea for 10 years. What I wanted to do, in the early 80s, I won 2 Emmys as co-executive producer of television's outstanding informational series. And, you know, the whole thing where you went up and kissed the blonde and shook hands. And there was
and
a
you
big...
didn't give a political speech in those days.
Right, but what it got me to think about, I wanted to do something about the century, but I didn't want to have someone just telling the story today. And so I had this idea, which I finally got down on paper, and this was in the early 90s, and it took a long time to sell it, but I finally sold it to the A&E network. They funded it, and originally it was going to be called Growing Up with the Century, and my goal was to interview 100 significant people of the 20th century to find out what it was like growing up. You were there. It's where you are there comes from. And who were the people I had? The man who founded the polio vaccine, Jonas Salk. Broadcasters like I had the 3 anchors at the time, Peter Jennings, Tom Brokaw, and who was the guy with CBS? I just lost it, but it doesn't matter. But anyway, the point is, what it was is these people were told, you can't talk about your latest book. We don't want to hear about your new series. We want to hear what was it like growing up in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. I had Douglas Fairbanks Jr. to talk about the 20s. Just an amazing group of people. Mickey Mantle to talk about the Yankees and baseball. And even in next week's show that I have, actually February 13th, I have a segment that I did with Mickey in that series where he talks about what it was like to welcome or not Jackie Robinson into baseball. It's a whole other look. It's one thing for someone who wasn't there to tell you, well, it was important, and he for the first time, a black man playing Major League Baseball. But what did it feel like if you were playing against him? Well, and Mantle was a terrific interview. So I interviewed these 100 people, took their comments, and did these 12 one-hour specials, and it won cable television's highest award. I'm very proud of it.
You know, it's really funny, just that concept, and I'm, just because of a lot of the work I do, not related to the show, but out in the community, I'm always encouraging people to get the stories of the seniors in their lives. Because even if it's not in a book or on a television show, those are important stories and can affect the world beyond if you get them. And I know that I've been very, very blessed. At one time I ran a one man, one act show, and we specialized in nursing homes. And so I got to meet a lot of people that were just super, super cool. The first person, an old lady who knew John F. Kennedy, was the first person to enlist in the Peace Corps. Yeah. And a guy who had been not a flag raiser, but had been on Mount Suribachi during the battle. You know, these kind of things are very important.
They were there.
They were there, and it's important to understand. I mean, there's even a guy locally, and I just interviewed him recently for Martin Luther King Day, Tim Murray, president of Christian Men in Action, doing a lot of work for the local community. I actually met him because he was doing something for the lower economic community for Christmas, making sure kids get toys and stuff. And he was telling me the story about even in Claremont, when he was a kid in the 60s, he wasn't allowed to swim in the beach that is now Waterfront Park.
Oh, yeah.
He had to go to West Beach because they didn't allow black people in certain parts of town. Just amazing to me, and it's important to see the difference, to see the change. And I'm sure you saw that through your show.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
that it was that perspective of what did life used to be as opposed to what it is today. Trying to convince my children that, yes, I grew up in a time that every television wasn't color. How about this? That every home didn't have 2 or 3 of them.
Oh, yeah.
You know, when I was a kid, and I'm sure you, the center of your family when you were a kid was probably the radio.
It was.
Right? And the center for me was the one television. You didn't go into the television room until mom and dad told you could go into the television room,
The
right?
biggest kick of my young life was when I was about 8 or 9, and for Christmas I got a shortwave radio. It was it was a cheap short, and I was living at the time in New Jersey, and I can remember lying in bed late at night with the radio under the blanket so my mom wouldn't worry.
Hear, right, muffle the
and
sound.
all of a sudden, though, I was able, it was a cheap one. I couldn't get London, but I got Chicago. And here I was in New Jersey listening to someone talking from Chicago. Well, you know, you try to tell a kid about that today, there's no comparison.
I was telling somebody just last night that when my wife and I moved here, we were fascinated with, because, you know, we are the space generation. I can remember as a little kid watching Neil Armstrong walk on the moon. It's the day we picked up my cousin from coming back from Vietnam. And I'm trying, we move here, and my wife and I want to get the kids out to see the shuttle because we can see the shuttle from our front yard.
Yeah.
And the kids are like, yeah, Dad, it's space.
Yep.
And their mother and I are like, yeah, it's space.
Yeah.
So it's that perspective.
I did a lot of work with the astronauts, and we did a 50th anniversary here at CPAC on the moon landing this past year.
You know, that's actually a good chance for me to segue into the show You Are There. Tell us about You Are There, because it's not just one show, and I think that's one of the cool things about it. So, tell us a little bit about the show. Obviously, it grew up. You use a lot from.
Well, I have a library. I have a collection from. I have produced well over 200 shows during my career. Many of them I own, many of them I don't. I get permission to use them. The thing is that You Are There, I take pieces, all right? So, for instance, in this show coming up, our next show is called Superstars of Sports, Up Close and Personal. Not just about hitting home runs, but what's it like to be that person? And, you know, with this terrible tragedy this past week with Kobe Bryant, you get the same feeling, how the feelings come out. And in the show, we, as I mentioned earlier, we have Mickey Mantle is talking about Jackie Robinson. All right, it isn't. I mean, and I have Jesse Jackson talking about him too. But it's different. It's better. It's good to have Mickey Mantle in there, and he tells a story in the show. He when the Yankees won the 52 or 53 series, he had never met Jackie Robinson before then. And Jackie Robinson came into the Yankee dressing room, put out his hand and shook hands with all the Yankees, congratulating him. And when Mantle tells that story and how he felt, it's a whole other look at Jackie Robinson. And similarly, I love research, and I've done tons of research through the years, 70 years. National Archives.
You're probably really good at it by this point, right?
I once found this marvelous video interview with Babe Ruth. It's at the end of his career. I'm featuring about 5 minutes of it in this show, February 13th, 2 o'clock here at CPAC. He's sitting in an armchair with a robe on, and he's got this big scrapbook, and he's showing you pages from his scrapbook.
Give us an idea of the obviously you're going to be using clips that not only that you interviewed, but other clips that you found. But I don't want people to get the idea that this is you're in here and you just hit a thing.
No.
It's not like this is actually a live performance. You could tie them together.
And it's me telling stories that otherwise would not be in a show because I have experienced them. I mean, I became friendly with Jackie and Rachel Robinson. I did a special about him in 1972, that far back. And in fact, their son David ended up becoming a production assistant for my company. And see, the stories, whatever and where did David go? David was terrific, but he didn't want to spend the rest of his life just being known as Jackie Robinson's son. You know where he ended up? He went to Tanzania and built a marvelous coffee business.
Wow.
We're still in touch.
Wow.
David is about 62 today. Like
a young
kid,
guy.
A kid.
Like me.
Yeah. But the thing is, see, I work with them. I did 2 shows with President Kennedy and Jackie. I also did for CBS Rose Kennedy, his mother's autobiography. I got to know these people. They weren't my closest best friends, but with Rose Kennedy, when I showed her the rough cut, which she insisted on this show, which was her television autobiography, she was quite serious about seeing it. And when it was all over and we had like 10 people in the screening room, she turned to me and she said, "Mr. Grinker, there are only 2 errors in the show." She said, "Number 1, you have a shot. I remember the day you were in Hyannisport, and I showed you around the house, but when you're outside, you have the corner windows, and one set of shades are this high and another this high." And it must have been early in the morning because during the day they were always at the same height.
To catch that.
All right, but she caught that. And the other mistake, she said, "You also in your script referred to my husband Joe in the 1930s becoming the U.S. ambassador to the Court of St. James. It should be St. James's."
Those little things, Charlie, to listen to you, and I see this a lot of times in people your age, we're talking to a guy my age or younger, you just seem so fearless. Where did that come from?
The Army. Yeah, I was just another kid who
Now, you didn't stand up and say, "Hey, take me." They sent you a letter and said, "You're coming."
Oh, yeah. No, I was drafted, and I thought I was going to get some kind of a job in special services because of my background. I had at that time, by the way, I had also had a part-time job on NBC's First Tonight Show with Steve Allen.
Oh, yeah.
And Steve Allen and his producer, I took a job, for 1 week I agreed to be a sandwich man. Where you walk down the street with the wood sign on both sides? I have pictures of it. And actually advertising the First Tonight Show, 1953.
Maybe I should try that.
Huh?
Maybe I should tie that.
Well, you
for
know
the
what
show.
happened? That's how I got the job, though, because the last day I was walking, they came up the street, and the producer, Johnny Stearns, a guy who he had a show, Mary Kay and Johnny. But anyway, he said to me, "Hey, kid, how's it going?" Because I was giving away tickets, and he said, I said, "I'm out of tickets. I'm going to have to go back and get some more." He said, "We'll get you some. We'll bring them back." He said, "But is it going well?" I said, "I think people really want to go see the show. They all seem excited. They know Steve from his work." And he said, "I got to ask you a question." He said, "You have any interest in being a part-time production assistant?" Well,
yes.
I looked at him. I always think of Quincy Jones' line, who I also have worked with and interviewed. Quincy said the only one answer to that is the Pope Catholic. Yeah. That's the line. And I didn't use that line with him. I said, I would love to.
So what was it about the service that made you fearless?
Well,
was it seeing all the other guys? Was it knowing other dudes you were there?
Before I went into the Army, I really didn't know who I was. I had wonderful parents. I was well loved. My parents both worked long hours, but I just hadn't figured out, well, how many people really figure themselves out when they're still 17, 18, 19 years old, you know? And
yeah, that concept, I raised a lot of kids, and I know that concept comes down to there is a misnomer that you know what you want to do, and there are some kids that do, but most of them don't. You know, most of them are like me. They got to figure it. Heck, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do.
Get a job, yeah.
You know, unfortunately, we're running out of time.
Okay.
This is always the way it goes. I could go on and on and on. Someday I'll have a 2-hour show. Of course, we'll talk about that down the road someday. One of the things that I asked Charlie about earlier, he's very gracious, very humble, actually, in spite of all the shows that he talks. He does a lot of work in the community. Seniors and the concept of getting them to understand that there is life still and that their story is important is very close to his heart. And I just wanted to make sure we mentioned that before we wrap up the show. What's next for you, for CPAC, for the show?
Well, at the moment, I'm certainly looking forward to a 4th year of You Are There. We've got so much wonderful material.
Now, you do 8 shows a year.
We do one show a month from October to May. We take off over the summer when a lot of people go back north, and not as many as used to.
Right.
But for instance, for our show on the moon landing, we had well over 100 people in this little theater here. It was terrific. But what's next? I just think we can grow this show. We have people coming now from further away. We've already started to get a few people from Orlando coming up. We get people from Winter Garden, whatever. I think that I would like to do this for maybe another 10 years. I think by the time I get to 95, I might slow down.
That's a great goal.
Okay.
That's a great goal. You know, one of my favorite stories about, I'm sure you probably interviewed him, of George Burns, is the fact that on his he died at 99. On his 97th birthday, he signed a contract with the London Palladium for his 105th birthday. Wow. I love that kind of mentality and looking forward. So you doing this show till you're 95, I don't find that at all strange. You know, maybe when you retire at 103, you'll hand it over to me. Maybe I'll have that much experience by then. Look, we've really appreciated being out here, and again, I want to do a shout out for Catherine Dean at the city's communications director, who was a great help in setting this up. All the staff here at CPAC, which are absolutely amazing. And I want to encourage you, look, go online, see what's coming on. I'm walking down the hallway here at CPAC and seeing not just the shows that are going on, but they have a gym here, they have yoga classes for seniors, they have a lot of senior activities going on here, they have stuff for kids. Get online and find out what they're doing. Better yet, bring your behind up here and find out what's going on. You might even be able to help and volunteer. There's an idea. I want to say thank you, Charlie, for joining us.
Joe, my pleasure.
You've been great. Now, you know Joe, and Joe knows Charlie. Look, if you know somebody who should be a guest on Joe Knows South Lake, please, please, please reach out to me. I'm sure Jay has the information up. Also, if you are not branding your business on South Lake TV and on Joe Knows South Lake, you are missing out on customers that should be yours. So if you want to do that, reach out to me. If you just want to have a conversation about it, reach out to me. Maybe there's a show for you and your business. Again, reach out to me. We can have a conversation. Finally, I want to remind you that there is greatness inside you. And as Charlie has been doing for well over 70 years, using his greatness to bring out the greatness in others, I encourage you today, use your greatness to bring out the greatness in somebody else. Touch a life and thereby change the world. This has been Joe Knows South Lake with Charlie Grinker at the Black Box at the Claremont Performing Arts Center. I will see you on Monday, and I love you. Bye-bye. My name is Joe. 20 years ago, my wife and I moved to Lake County with our 4 young children and settled down. In that time, we've worked, worshiped, played, and raised our family. Today, I've met the people and discovered the businesses and organizations that make up a vibrant, dynamic community. Join us as we share with you what makes South Lake great. I'm Joe, and Joe knows South Lake. Joe knows South Lake would like to thank the following sponsors: